Welcome to Eastlake. We are an inclusive faith community dedicated to the free search for truth and meaning, seeking to live out a more just and life-giving spirituality in the modern world. We see faith as less about doctrines and dogmas demanding total agreement, but a life to be lived, enjoyed, and given away to others. What unites us is a growing awareness that life is a gift and love is the point. We welcome the entire human family, regardless of race, age, creed, physical abilities, marital or economic status, gender identity, or sexual orientation. So if you are curious and have come to see, if you are tired and have come to rest, if you are grateful and have come to share, if you are journeying and have come to grow, if you are wounded and have come to heal, if you are joyful and have come to shine, welcome home. Today, we hear from Bart Campolo as he continues our series, The Way I See It. Please check the description for links to our quarterly Spotify playlist and guided meditation.
Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We're excited that you're jumping into this series that we've been in called The Way I See It. And I'm here today with my friend, Kristen Birchnow, and very excited to have our guest, Bart Campolo, doing a follow-up to his talk that he shared last week. Bart, thanks for joining the conversation.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's nice to see faces.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned that in your talk, so we're so glad that well, first of all, thanks for giving your talk and for recording that for us. I'm glad that we get to at least have, if it's not in person, it's digital interaction, pretend interaction, right? That's better than nothing. But before we kind of just dive in a little bit to your talk, I would love to just hear a little bit of an update on what you're up to in the world and what's keeping you busy.
Well, golly, the first time I came to Eastlake, I think I came up from Los Angeles when I was the humanist chaplain at USC. And since that time, I had moved back to Cincinnati because my wife couldn't stand Los Angeles. And I spent some time working on the campus of UC, again, as a humanist chaplain. But now, eventually I figured out, like, you couldn't make a living. Yeah. The thing about ministry is it only works if you have a tithe-paying congregation.
Right. Right.
We humanists don't have those sorts of things. So anyway, the long and the short of it is, my wife was like, "You got to get a job." So I ended up going back to school and becoming a licensed professional counselor. And so I, like, here in Cincinnati, I'm like Joe local counselor, but I still have my podcast. And so I also end up coaching people all over the world who are going through sort of religious transitions. And then I podcast, which is kind of like the one place where I have like something, like where I still believe I have some small platform, or like I'm engaged in. My life used to be a very big life. Now it's very, very small life. But I do a lot of stuff. But the other thing is, my granddaughter and my daughter and my son-in-law and my granddaughter, they live around the block from me now in Cincinnati. Oh. And so mainly I play guys.
That's fun.
And have tea parties.
Tea parties with grandkids. That sounds like a blast. That's awesome. Well, thanks for kind of giving us that update. And before we even jump in, what's your podcast name, just so people can follow along? Eastlakers that are not following, that can start subscribing.
It's called Humanize Me, and I do, like, it's funny, like it really is just me having conversations with people that are doing all sorts of really interesting things around the world. And sort of asking asking the question, like, what can I learn from what you're doing and from what you're learning that I can apply to making the most of this life?
It's awesome.
Which is kind of the mission here.
Yeah, it's great. And even I think there's probably some Eastlakers who maybe even haven't heard you share at all, right? Because we have a lot of people are just tuning in via our podcast too. Some don't even really watch the video. So I'm curious, like, for those that maybe don't even have context on the Bart Campolo experience, you don't probably, we could spend the next like 2 hours like going through all of that, and we don't need to, or we should. But in terms of like how you describe your worldview, Humanize Me, right? A humanist perspective. What are some of the kind of main like principles of that kind of perspective?
I mean, the first thing that probably people will notice is like, gosh, that guy talks like a youth pastor. And there's a reason for that. Like half of you East Lakers, I grew up in kind of evangelical Christianity. My dad was a big evangelical leader. I ultimately became like an inner city missionary and a guy who ran around giving platform speeches. So like I came at it with that sensibility. About 10 years ago, I finally came to the end of my supernatural credulity, my ability to believe in stuff. And then you're like, oh crap, I'm like a minister who loves people and wants to build community and rescue people from sadness, but I don't believe in God anymore. So what do you do now? Not a dilemma you would know anything about, Peter, or Chris. So in the end, like through a long circuitous way, I ended up as the humanist chaplain at USC, and it was there that I figured out the answer to your question. Because we used to put up these signs out on the thing that says, "Are you a humanist?" And kids would come by and go like, "I don't know, what's a humanist?" And I realized like it was one of those cool words that like everybody's heard, but nobody really knows what it means. So you can define it any way you want to.
Nice.
And my friends and I ended up defining it as somebody who is deeply committed to building loving relationships and to making things better for other people and to cultivating kind of wonder and gratitude for just the privilege of being alive, but like for consciousness itself, for just the ability to like move your hands and like feel things and taste things and fall in love. And who comes to that and sort of goes like, I want to pursue those things because I think that's the best way to make the most of this brief period of consciousness that I have, rather than because like I'm going to get something for it, I'm going to go somewhere, or I'm going to live on forever. It's just like that's the best. That's the way I can maximize this opportunity. So humanism is just the thing that says, hey, this human experience, including the part like where like I know I'm going to die, but I'm not dead yet, so I have to think about that. Like what's interesting is humanism is in a sense like I'm really committed to the human experience and to making the most of the human experience. If that makes any sense.
It definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
Hey Eastlake, Peter here. Thanks so much for tuning in to watch this message. I wanted to do just a quick interruption to say thank you to so many of you who are making regular contributions to Eastlake. Eastlake is a nonprofit, and everything that we do is because of a community of consistent and generous people who really believe in this place and want to see it continue. So if you're a part of that community, thank you for how you make this place go. If you are tuning in regularly and are part of this community, but you haven't yet jumped in to making a financial contribution, we would encourage you to do that and encourage you to go to eastlakecc.com to help support Eastlake as a community and continue to make these messages possible. Thanks so much for letting me interrupt your message. Let's jump back in.
I find that perspective so helpful, and it's like so optimistic, or actually maybe that's the wrong term. Optimistic seems to be the term that like you're only looking for the good, but maybe meaningful is a better term. Like it just feels like a very meaningful perspective on the human experience.
I have a friend who always says I'm hopeful, but I'm not optimistic. And I think that like one of the things about being secular is once you get rid of all the kind of the texts and those things, you're left with kind of like science. Like, how do you know what's going on? You're like, what's the data say? Like, what do the experimentations show? And like, according to the data, there's not a lot of reason to be optimistic. Like even if you blew off the short-term stuff, like in the end, the sun is a star, stars explode, they blow up everything around them, and like everything that you're building, everything that you do, everything that matters to you will ultimately be wiped out. Like that goes without saying. Like, so there's no reason for like long-term optimism, or in our case as a human species, even short-term optimism. But hope, hope is not just like, it's all going to be okay. Hope is this sense that like in the midst of these circumstances, something I do might make a difference. Like I might be able to slow it down by 10 minutes so that some other person will get to fall in love. I might be able to connect with 3 more people than I would have if I hadn't have done this exercise program. And because of that, those people's lives will be significantly better. So like hope says, hey, we can make meaning. We can make more meaningful. We can make love. We can make more love in the midst of this. So it's not like I know it's all going to turn out okay. It's that like it could be better than it is right now if I
participate.
If I participate. So I think of myself as somebody who's, you know, hugely hopeful and not optimistic at all.
That's a great jumping off point for the conversation too. What are you thinking, Kristen?
I'm thinking my husband and I had this conversation last night about a variety of things that you talked about in this message before I listened to it. So I'm just thinking we were just talking about like, what is there to be hopeful about? And my husband's kind of a doomsday, like.
Oh yeah, I'm a collapsarian from way back.
Oh yeah. So we were having this conversation where I was like, I understand that's how you view the world. That gives me anxiety and makes me not like to like live in the day. And so we were having this conversation of like, what can we be hopeful about? Because I can't listen to you talk about like, where are we going to escape to when things get really bad? And we talked about like, it really is just like our kids and what we do at the end of the day together and our neighbors and our friends. And like, this is what we're living for right now. And is that good enough for you? Because it's good enough for me to just be like, can we make meaning for our 2 little kids and the friends that we're invested in, you know, the 5 families that we spend time with right now. So that was our conversation last night.
When my wife and I were younger, we lived in Philadelphia and we had friends there who had adopted a kid who was bound to die before she turned 15. Like she had certain kinds of medical complications. She was like, they got her as a very young child and she was going to die. And they knew that, and the whole family knew that. And she did die. And the equation of their life was, you say, well, why bother sending her to school? She's never going to college. But that's not the only reason you send a kid to school.
Yeah.
And why bother working on homework? Like they were committed to giving her a life. That might not have been as long as everybody else's life, but that was rich and full of love and connection. Well, on some level, the difference between 15 years and 85 years on the cosmic scale is not that great. Mm-hmm. So the question is, if I told you that you and your children would all be dead in 5 years, would you keep loving them? Would you try to? Would you play tea party or whatever? You know, like would you go to a ball game? Would you laugh? Would you tell them jokes? Would you tickle them? And I think like I sure hope so.
Yeah.
Because that's the deal. Everybody you know is going to die. Like when on the day you die, you don't just die. The whole universe, as far as you are concerned, goes away. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that it's not worth the price of admission to keep living in the midst of it. And so, yeah, I can go down this collapsarian track and like, it does inform some of my like decision-making. Mm-hmm. But in the end, if anything, when I believed that we had eternity, I wasn't terrifically motivated to make the most of each moment because I had an infinite amount of them. What makes these moments precious is precisely the fact that they are rare. And
scarcity.
Yeah, scarcity. And so like, let's not kid ourselves, you know. One of the, you know, I mean, I've been in a lot of hospital beds when people were dying. All of a sudden they were doing business. They were forgiving people. They were telling people they loved them for the first time. They were confessing things. All sorts of beautiful stuff happens that you go like, you know what? Everybody's on their deathbed every morning. They just don't know it. And so on some level, I think like the destruction of optimism, which is for me, like losing the belief in heaven and you know, and like eternal, you know, you go like, that was a really optimistic thought. Everything's going to be great. We're all going to live forever in utopia. Like, and everybody will be happy and nobody will be sad ever again. There'll be no conflict. Like, you know, barring the fact that like every good experience you have is born out of some kind of conflict. Like, barring the fact that, right, like forgetting the fact that like you've never seen a fictional account of heaven that looked like anything other than a nightmare. Like, but like when you took away that optimism, everything's going to be okay. That for me was the beginning of taking this life seriously and of measuring it as infinitely valuable. And I would say that like the destruction of my optimism was the beginning of my hope. And the beginning of my I just became much more passionate about the connect. And again, speaking to what I talked about in that like midnight, darkly lit room that I was talking to you in when I gave the talk, like, that was when I really realized, like, it's all about connection. Like, it's for me, like the only thing that sort of redeems this thing is the connection, and is to make connections and to foster connections for people that don't have them, which kind of brings me back to what we were talking about in the talk.
Yeah. I'm not sure we need to say anything else, Kristen. I feel like, I don't know, you got me crying. You got me thinking I need to do more tea parties. Like, why am I doing a tea party right now, Bart? Maybe we should just end the discussion.
I did a tea party yesterday with my daughter. A tea party serving ketchup, by the way.
That's a child delicatessen, right? That's key.
But we did it yesterday.
I look at your house behind you, Kristen, and I go like, these are people that are thoughtful. Like, I can just tell by like the things that are hanging and the way the photographs are arranged. Like, these are people, like in Tolstoy's maxim, all happy families are the same. Like, I just look and I go like, I think that's probably a happy family. Just the way that woman's talking and the stuff that she's got hanging. I go like, but you and I are both aware that there are loads and loads of people that did not have the luck to grow up in a house like that, or they have not been able to create one, or they thought they had one and it blew up. And so for me, that's where, if you want to see like my voice get gravelly and me get tough, it's I go like, you know what? It is not enough to have tea parties.
Yeah.
At some point, you have to get in the boat and go start cruising around looking for people that are floating in the water and bring them back in.
Yeah. The thing that stood out to me the most, the sentence that you said in your message was, if there were more good friends out there, I'd be out of business. And I stopped it, and I just had to think about that because, we're hearing, I appreciate that right now there's more and more awareness about mental health, and it's okay to not be okay. And that the need for therapists is booming. It's like the one industry. Yeah. It's the one industry that is just exponentially growing right now from what I've heard. And so I just sat there and I thought, gosh, how many of my friends are going to a therapist to talk about things that I could ask them about on a walk? And so I think I just appreciated you bringing that up. And I'm just really full of thoughts about where can I do this better, and with whom, and how, and what questions am I not asking, and why am I talking about, I'm going, it's full, my head is full. And so I'm thankful for what you said.
Oh, good. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times over the last 25 years, even before I became a therapist, I would have a college student, I'd just be, having lunch with, and he's got a new girlfriend, and they would go like, so how's it going in the relationship? And he'd be like, oh, pretty good, she's great. I go like, what do you like about her? No one's ever asked me that. And I go like, well, I'm asking. And I go like, and sometimes there would be great answers there. And sometimes they would go like, I don't know. She'll have me. I'm like, is that a good enough reason? Or sometimes somebody would be taking a job, and I would say, like, other than the money, I mean, do you believe, like your boss? I remember asking this one kid, I said, like, So you went and you interviewed and you got offered this job for $100,000 coming out of college. And I said, yeah, what do you think of the guys that you're working with? Like the other people that interviewed you? Like, do you like their marriages? Did it sound like they had the kind of friendships you want to have? Like, are they the kind of person you want to be? And you know what he said to me? I have no idea.
Yeah.
I never asked. And I was like, you're getting on a train and you don't want to know where it's going. Like, cause like this job leads to that job, leads to that job. Like you're going to end up that guy. So like, do you like him?
You like that guy now.
And they had never thought about it. And I remember the kid looking at me like, nobody's ever asked me this question. And I go like, that is not a compliment to my incredible insight. That means that kid's parents are asleep on the job. And so is his favorite professor. And so is his high school soccer coach. Like, come on now. And so at some point, that's what we need to challenge ourselves to go like, you know, what should we be talking about? What like your friend gets a new boyfriend, gets a new girlfriend. You like, what's going on in there?
Mm-hmm.
What attracts you to them? What do you think they like about you? It's a really good question.
I think too, I was thinking too, like, I'm really out of practice because of COVID.
Oh, yeah.
I just had a 1.5 year break from having to talk to anyone. It kind of was like first of all, we were isolated, and then I felt like I was just in survival mode, you know, of just like, get through it. And now I feel like my social stamina, I'm way out of practice.
Okay, so let's stop. I want to reframe that. You're not out of practice. Okay? What you are is we've wiped the slate clean, and you have a fresh, you get to recreate yourself as a social being. Like you get to go back to the drawing board and go like, you know what? Like I had a friend whose house burned down, and they built the same house on the same property. But like when they built the same house, they did fix that stupid wall that was between the bath and tub, and they made based on what they, and like I would say, this is a chance for us to sort of go like, okay, we've been broken down to scratch. Now let's build a base. What are the,
reset opportunity?
Let's read some articles about listening skills and conversation skills. Because you go like, my conversation skills suck, and I go like, yeah, me too. You go like, what did you do? I got a book. Marriage. Here's a great one. There's Gottman. The Gottman has this book, the seven factors in a healthy marriage. I read that book. It was like Marriage for Dummies. And you go like, but you're a relationship expert. I go like, yeah, but everything got thrown out of whack. You guys are too. You're great relational. I've been with you guys relational. But I'm telling you, this is a huge opportunity for us to go like, let's go back to the basics. 5 good questions, like build up our stamina. Go like, I'm going to go 1 phone call today, or I'm going to go 15. I'm going to walk with somebody, and I'm going to say I have to be back by 12 because I don't have the stamina. And I'm just going to go for 30 minutes with this person. And then next week it might be 35. Like, I just think this is an opportunity to do a reset.
I do too. Thanks for that perspective.
I like that. I do. I think it is an opportunity to kind of revisit and refresh even our own definitions of ourselves. But I'm curious, Bart, because your passion is for people and for the human experience is so inspiring and encouraging. And sometimes, like, I have a little resistance just because I'm like that. Like, maybe that's just Bart, and maybe Bart is just enthusiastic for the human experience. And it's because we don't, like, obviously you're giving a talk and you're giving the Bart on his A game version of Bart, right? So how do I kind of cultivate that enthusiasm for other people, right? So like, because sometimes I have a gravity to just hunker down and to like, we're going to do what makes sense for us. And I'm not going to like make it my job to try to help everybody else connect. I have 4 kids. I have my wife. I'm just trying to like stay in touch with a couple of buddies and to like try to go help another group of people get connected feels like hard. And so I'm curious, like, how do I cultivate that sense of love? Like that's a big hearted person.
That's good. First of all, don't reduce love to deep, meaningful conversations. Like that's my shtick. That's probably your shtick, right? Like if I'm going to go out there and do something in the world, I'm not going to cook a casserole. I'm not very good at that. And I'm not going to fix that person's car. And I'm not going to, I'm not going to write a poem for them or a piece of, I'm like, I'm going to do this, what we're doing, right?
Right.
That's not like, the question isn't how can you do this? The question is, what is it that you can do that creates a context or creates an opportunity for people to connect? So that sometimes a guy who organizes the Little League or a woman who organizes the ballet program, like when she's just back there with a spreadsheet ordering, furniture or ballet slips, and they go, yeah. What she's really doing is she's setting the table for a bunch of kids to have an experience with a ballet teacher who's got that charisma thing that she doesn't have either. And so like, I think it's really important, like loving the world is a team sport. That's why I'm glad that that's why I don't like it when people leave the Christian church and then they go, like, well, I don't need church anymore. And they don't come to a thing like East Lake or some other, like, I don't know. I don't want to pejoratively say you're not Christian, but like, you know what you are. You're wacko.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Yeah.
But
That's a good definition.
But you got to have a team, because to create a context requires somebody to set up the chairs, somebody else to cook the food, somebody else to clean it up, somebody to do the spreadsheet to plan it out, somebody to show up and be the charismatic guy in front that gives the talk. And like, I'm real glad to have that role sometimes, but let's not kid ourselves. There is no talk. There is no I am because we are. Like and that's an old African Ubuntu kind of proverb, but it's true. And so I think it's really important not, when we're talking about getting energy for other people, not to reduce it to like, I have to have conversational energy, because not everybody's going to have that. Okay?
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you one little trick that was really useful to me, and it's been useful to some of the people I've worked with, is go to a high school girls basketball game where you don't know anybody, and just go sit in the stands and pick a kid during warm-ups and focus your attention on that kid and say, I'm going to see this game through that kid. Maybe they sit on the bench the whole game. I don't know. But like, you're with that kid and you look for their parents in the stands, or if their parents aren't in the stands, you think about it. And when that kid scores a basket, or when they, like, you cheer for them, you cheer for the team, you cheer for that kid. Give them a name if you want to. And you go like, come on, man. You spend an hour and a half that way, that's not going to actually change anything. Like, yeah, it's a muscle, man. It's a muscle that you exercise in terms of like, I'm going to pick somebody and I'm going to focus some attention. And you go like, why do it in that setting? Because there's no pressure there. Kid doesn't even know you're there. They don't even know what you're doing. I mean, I've done it. I've done that exercise. And then at the end of the game, I go down and I find that kid and I just go like, hey, great game. Or, hey, I love the way you cheer for your team, or whatever it is. And the kid's like, whatever.
Weirdo. Who's that
They
person?
don't care. They don't care about me. I'm doing it for myself. But the point is, like, it's just like when you exercise in the gym and you're lifting lead barbells or whatever, the iron barbells. The iron doesn't need to be lifted. It doesn't help the iron. Like, you're not doing anything productive. You're building up muscles that you use if a car ever falls on your kid in the parking lot, right?
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is, like, caring about other people. It doesn't come natural. It comes naturally in certain situations, like have a baby, the endorphins will rush. Unless things are going wrong, you're going to have a connection there. But in a lot of other situations, it's a muscle you got to exercise. It's a thing you got to practice. And the other thing is that if you did that, if you went to a game or a recital or whatever it is that you go to, and you did that, you focus on a person. Go to a grocery store, focus on a checker. Just sit there in the grocery store and watch that checker for 20 minutes and like focus on them. Not stalking if you like keep checking the thing. But what I'm saying is that when you do that, no matter what happened in that hour, on your way home, you will look in the rearview mirror of your car, you will look at yourself and you'll go like, that's a person who invests time and energy in becoming a better lover. And that identity I'm a person who cares about connections. I'm a person who's committed to life. I'm a person who's trying to be more than I want tomorrow than I was today. That alone will change the game. You go like, wait, and you think then the next day, if an opportunity comes across my path, I'm more likely to take it or to see it. And I go like, yeah, because you'll have defined yourself as a person who cares, or a person who at least cares about caring.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the act of trying to generate love generates an identity that ends up generating love.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. I need to work out, I think, is what I'm hearing you say. That muscle. I'm saying I'm using your metaphor.
Absolutely.
And it sounds to me as if this has been years and years of like fostering that genuine curiosity for other humans. And over time that starts to grow and grow and grow and creates enthusiasm and passion. So it's super inspiring.
I'm a headshot. I only got one gift. I will tell you this. This one thing, and I know we gotta go. But in my experience, smart people, capable people, talented people, a lot of times they know that like a meal does not appear without intentional effort. They know that like they won't get in shape unless they work out. They won't have a lot of money unless they go out there. They know that like that virtually anything worth having requires some intentional effort. The one caveat is that a lot of people think that good relationships are the birthright of good people.
Mm-hmm.
You go like, I'm a nice person, I'm a good person, I'm a caring person, therefore I will have good relationships. And in my experience, having good relationships is a craft like any other. And it requires practice and training and intentional effort and evaluation, and then do like, oh, that didn't work out so well, let me learn from that. Like, it's if people thought more about friendship and loving kindness the way they think about woodworking or baking, then Kristen, the world would be full of people and that were good friends in one way or another, and I would be out of business. Yeah. As soon as people figure out that it ain't rocket science, that it's more like baking or archery, we'll be in great shape.
Well, and I appreciate the reminder, like it's a skill. You have to practice, and even just, with marriage or parenting or friendships, to assume that you know what to do is very strange. Especially if you were raised by people that didn't have very good relationships. Yeah.
Like some of the people in my office, I'll teach them some of the stuff and they'll go like, I feel like such an idiot that I didn't know this. And I go like, where would you have learned this? Like, what, did you stay home from school when they were giving friendship lessons? And they go, oh, they never gave friendship lessons. I know. And I'm like, they should have. Instead, they were teaching you a bunch of completely useless shit. They should have been teaching you how to balance your checkbook, how to change a tire, and how to make a friend. Like, those are things you could use.
Yeah.
And so, but the thing is that if you like, effort alone won't get it. Like, if you don't know how to play the guitar, you can stay in your room with a guitar forever and probably never figure it out. At some point, you've got to go, can somebody show me this? Can I read a book? It's like the idea that you're supposed to be able to summon up. Like, if you're a good person, you shouldn't need to ask for help in making good relationships. What a load of crap. Like, and so the thing is, like, if I was in Eastlake, I would look around and go like, who has good relationships? And I wouldn't go like, I want to be friends with that person. I would say, hey, can I take you to lunch and pick your brains? Like, how does this work? Like, where did you meet these people? How do you, and like, I would just make myself a student of it and not expect that you should be good at it just because you're a nice person.
Yeah.
We're all nice people, but I can't play guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My last thing that I wanted to ask you, and it's kind of a big one, but you said it at the end of your message. You said, raising children who are full of hope, even though there's a lot to be afraid of.
Yeah.
Okay, how do you do that? Just a side question. How do you do that?
I've got two thoughts that come right to my mind.
Okay, good.
One is the one I'm working on, right now. And that is, I'm convinced that our brains and our emotional psyches and all that stuff evolved in an era when nobody knew more than 150 people and they all lived within a mile of them. Like, we're tribal.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have access to knowing about floods in China and nuclear disasters in Japan and global warming and refugee crises. And in fact, we think that it's moral of us to be aware of these things, to be global citizens. But I think that what's actually happening is we have access to so many people and so many situations, and we're aware of so much going on around us. And that's before we get to the fictional people that we care about, that we see in TV shows. Because I'm really hurting over some people that don't exist right now. I think it's too much. And so if I was going to try to raise kids that had hope, I would sort of try to teach them a certain amount of digital discipline and to watch their diet and go like, you need to know something about the world, but you don't need to know everything about the world. And like, that's not a problem that we can have any impact on. So we're not going to spend a lot of time thinking about it, but we are going to spend a lot of time thinking about this other problem that we really can have an impact on. Like, there's this lady who lives up the street and we could have an impact on her. Or there's this kid at your school. Let's talk about the kids at school.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in some ways it's about focus. If you want to raise hopeful kids, you can't allow them to see 12 billion problems they can't solve. You have to, you're like, well, what about me? And I'm like, yeah, you would probably be more hopeful if you did the same. So I think it's really important to narrow your focus. And that requires a lot of discipline. So that would probably be like one of the things I would say about raising hopeful kids. And I think that the other thing is we often talk about kids' self-esteem. And I think it's really important. I learned this from I have a sister-in-law who's really into something called positive discipline. And there's a whole book on positive discipline. It's a really cool concept. But one of the things that they teach is they go like, when a kid does something well, don't just go like, good job, or you're amazing. They're like, I like the way you didn't give up when you didn't get it the first time. Like, I like that thing you did.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you want to get more specific. And you don't just like, you're a great kid, you're awesome. You want to say like, you know what? You really listen well. I like that way you listen. Because, and you're like, that's about building kids up so that they have like a realistic self-esteem rather than like, you're the greatest.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is, it's about focusing kids on like, this is your superpower. Not everybody, you can't do some things, and you'll figure that out for yourself. But this is something that you do kind of remarkable and better than other people. Like, you write really beautiful. And really giving kids a sense of not just I should help other people, but like, this is what you've got. Like, and sometimes in a family, you go like, as a family, we're good at this. Like, we do this well. Like, as a team, that guy came over to dinner and he left here, he floated out of here, that old man. Like, and you guys were part of, I went to a friend's house the other night with my 3-year-old, my 2.5-year-old granddaughter, and his 9-year-old and 12-year-old just took her away from us, and they entertained her the whole night while we talked to her parents. And she came back just floating on a balloon. The big kids love it. And I said to him the next week, I said, boy, that was amazing. He said, oh yeah. He said, so we sat down with the kids afterwards. He just said, that was so cool. Like, you guys, you shaping that little girl's sense of herself, but also like, that was a gift to us. And like, so I think a big part of how you raise hopeful kids is you don't convince them that the world is a safe place, because it's not. You convince them that they're good sailors. Mm. So it's not like there's not going to be any storms out there. There's going to be storms out there. Mm. But like, you know what? You're a good sailor. And you know what? We've got a good boat here together. Like, we're in this together. Like, and I'm behind, and like, so the whole thing, like, I'm behind you. That's why you can take a chance and try to love that kid, because if that kid rejects you, you can come home and I'll be here. And so it's in a sense of sort of teaching your children, like, we as a family are here to empower each other, to not only experience life for ourselves, but also to touch other people in different ways. And you can take chances out there because of what we've got here. And you should try this and you shouldn't try this because you're really not patient with people in math. You're very impatient. And so no, you shouldn't go to the tutoring program. But yes, you can go and be part of the community cleanup brigade because you're just got energy, boundless energy for that stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think so part of it is like narrowing their focus. And part of them is being clear with them about what you expect from them and what you think they're good at in this realm. Mm-hmm. Everybody's praising kids who get A's in school, but like we need to become more attentive to like, wow, that was a thoughtful question, or wow, that was a really good. You're a good hugger, and that old lady really liked that hug. Yeah. So okay, I talk way too much.
No, I love it. That example, Bart, that example that you just provided is similar to kind of how I think you wrapped the talk too, which is essentially challenging us to evaluate our metrics, evaluate how we keep score for living well, right? So we keep score financially, we keep score career-wise, we keep score health-wise, but the depth of relationship and our ability not just to have personal relationships that are positive, but to help other people have positive relationships, I think is just a fantastic critique and inspiration, motivation for us to live meaningfully. So this example with children, I think is another way, like even as I'm evaluating how I parent, to be careful not just to choose really simple metrics, binary metrics, right? You either passed the test or you didn't. To have a little bit more depth to my metrics, I think is what you're speaking to.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great way of saying it.
It's awesome.
It's funny. Like I know this is supposed to be a conversation, and you're talking to a reforming Baptist preacher, and so you're just like, yeah, conversations like we say hello and Bart talk for half an hour.
It's great.
But that's what we want to do. We want to hear.
That was the goal.
We want to hear more from you because we get to talk to each other, and Eastlake gets to hear from us often. So just the chance to hear more from you is great. So thank you.
Yeah. Hey, is one of those fictional characters that you care a lot about Ted Lasso? Because you spoke about Ted Lasso, and I feel like he's kind of like.
I'm well, actually, the truth is, I'm really worried about Rebecca and Sam because I think that relationship could actually be a really beautiful thing, but it has to be temporary because it's not appropriate for somebody that, right? I don't think it'll work long term, but I think they could really do something for each other, and I don't want to see that get messed up. So yes, I have a little anxiety because I love them. I love them.
You guys, I haven't watched it.
Oh, Kristen, if you want to experience somebody who is changing the game on how they keep score for life, Ted Lasso is a great example of that. So,
Kristen, remember how we talked about reframing? Like we need to build this from the ground up. A great base layer for you, a great commitment would be to watch Ted Lasso.
It's a huge commitment.
I have like so many subscriptions though. I can't. How many different ways are there to watch shows? And there's like one that I can't, and it's Ted Lasso.
You can get a week-long free subscription to Apple TV. You can. And you can watch the whole show.
Binge it in 1 week.
Some episodes a night, they're short, they're half hour. Like seriously, this is how I did it the first time through. And then I decided to give up eating so that I could
exactly. Yeah.
I'm gonna $4.99 subscription myself into debt.
Oh, for sure.
TV shows.
For sure.
Quit something else, Kristen. I'm telling you.
Okay.
Like you remember in The Matrix where he says like, "You are the one." Yeah. Ted Lasso.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thanks, Bart, for your time.
This is awesome. Thanks, Bart.
Love. And next time, when I used to work in Israel, they used to say next year in Jerusalem. Like that's what the Jews always say at Passover, like next year in Jerusalem. And what I would say is like next time in person.
In person.
I like it. I like it.
Right.
Cool. Thank you, Bart.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. To make a donation, head to eastlakecc.com/donate.